Hello everyone and welcome back to Beatley Tone's Beatles channel. Lovely to have you here. Thanks for joining me for this video and I hope you're all doing well. Now in this video I'm going to be doing part 2 of my George Harrison solo albums rankings, where we're going to go from numbers 5 to 1. Now if you missed part 1 of the video where we went from 11 to 6, I'm not going to give any spoilers away in this video if you haven't watched that yet, so I'm not going to tell you what albums came where from 11 to 6, but if you do want to watch that video before you watch this one, there is a link down in the description if you just want to click on it and go and watch part 1 of the video. Okay, we're going to do from number 5 to number 1, so I'll shut up and let's get on with it. So at number 5, I'm going for this album from 1987, Cloud 9, produced by Jeff Lynne. Now, if you know Jeff Lynne's work with ELO, you'll know that ELO are very sort of Beatles derivative or Beatles-esque, if you like. Jeff Lynne, a big Beatles fan, and here he was working with one of his heroes. Now, ELO were done and dusted by 1987. Their sort of peak was the late 70s, really, or mid to late 70s at least. But here he was producing one of his heroes. Now, for George, he hadn't made an album since 1982, Gone Troppo. So this album is kind of thought of as a little bit of a comeback album, although George never officially retired from the music business. He just couldn't sort of bring himself to go through that album making process for quite a few years. Now, what Jeff Lynne brings to the table here is he helps George to rediscover his pop credentials, his pop sensibilities, or his commercial sensibilities, because this is a really commercial album, probably the most commercial album in George's entire solo career. Out of the 11 tracks that are on this album, I would say maybe 6 of them could have been hit singles given the right promotion and approach. Now, the downside of having Jeff Lynne as the producer of this album is that some of the songs end up sounding more like ELO songs than they do George Harrison songs. But overall, I think that the combination of Jeff Lynne and George Harrison is a positive thing for both of them. As I say, George, produces his most commercial album of his career, and Jeff Lynne goes on to become a travelling Wilbury. He goes on to produce the Real Love and Free as a Bird singles for the Anthology project. Now, normally on George's albums, he normally picks a sort of, a big cast of crack studio musicians. And on this album, he does a little bit of that, but he also has some big names on it. Obviously, Jeff Lynne is present musically and vocally on this album. He plays guitar and keyboards and obviously adds backing vocals, but he also plays all the bass parts on this album as well. You've got Ringo here, you've got Elton John, you've got Eric Clapton, Jim Keltner is on the album, Gary Wright, who plays on a lot of George's solo albums, is here, as is Jim Horn, who plays saxophone on quite a few of George's solo albums as well, and he's here as well. Ray Cooper on percussion. Now, the album kicks off probably with a song that is that kind of stands apart from me from the rest of the album, the title track, Cloud 9. It's bluesy, it's very guitar-y, some great guitar work from Eric Clapton, and probably the least commercial song on the album, but an absolutely fantastic song. It is my favourite song on the album, but that doesn't really mean that the album kind of goes downhill from here, because this album is so strong. It has merits throughout the album. The second track, That's What It Takes, couldn't be more ELO if it tried. It sounds as if it could have come straight off of Out of the Blue or Discovery, but that's not a bad thing. This again is a really, really strong track, a track that I really like. Now, on this album, there are 3 or 4 songs that I kind of grouped together as being very sort of chunky, poppy, guitar-based pop songs. Fish on the Sand, Wreck of the Hesperus, This Is Love, and Devil's Radio. I kind of band them all together, all really catchy, really hooky guitar-based songs, and probably just about as rock as George gets throughout his whole solo career. Now, there are also 3 ballads on this album, Just For Today, which for me is the album's only clunker. It is too slow, it's a bit of a dirge, and it goes on too long for me. Another one, Someplace Else, is a great ballad, one that I really like, a very delicate ballad, very musical, and fits nicely in between Devil's Radio and Wreck of the Hesperus, and kind of adds light and shade to those 2 songs. The other one, Breath Away from Heaven, is a song from the Shanghai Surprise soundtrack, which kind of, it sticks out a little bit like a sore thumb on this album, but it's not unpleasant. It's a great sounding track, a very relaxing track, but probably not one of the best on the album. Now, the album closes with Got My Mind Set on You, which gave George, his first sort of top 10 single for well over a decade, and it's a great song with a great video. Also, fun fact, it's the first song of George's solo career that gets a kind of an extended version on the 12-inch of the single, but it was a big hit. Now, the other main track on this album, When We Were Fab, is a kind of a Beatles pastiche, co-written with Jeff Lynne, and it kind of started off as just a bit of a laugh, but developed into something much more important. It sounds like it's got shades of I Am the Walrus, with the cellos and the sort of just the musicality of it. It kind of sounds as if it could have come off of Magical Mystery Tour, with lots of sort of psychedelic paraphernalia or sound effects and that sort of thing. So it does give it that sort of feel that it could have been made in 1967. Now, up to this point, George had pretty much shunned his Beatles past. So making a record where here he is being Beatle George again, or a song about being Beatle George, was maybe a little bit of a risk for him to take, but it works an absolute treat. A fantastic song that had a superb video directed by Lowell Cream and Kevin Godley from 10cc. Brilliant track. I love it. So that is it. That's my number 5. It's Cloud 9 from 1987. So at number 4, I'm going for Brainwashed from 2002. Now, obviously, a posthumous album. This came out after George had died. But unlike other albums of this ilk, like, say, Milk and Honey, this does feel like a completed album, a complete body of work, and the album was recorded over quite a long period of time, and George had left, knowing how his health was, he'd left instructions with Danny about how he wanted to feel on each of the songs, and the album was finished with Danny and Jeff Lynne, and it's all credit to them how good this album has turned out. A very, very solid album indeed, and I really like it, but it took me a long time to appreciate just how good this album is. Now, it kicks off with the song Any Road, which is a song that I really love. George is playing a banjolele, a sort of a cross between a banjo and a ukulele, and there's plenty of guitar in there as well, and he's got this great lyric, if you don't know where you're going, any road can take you there, and that is just so true. I love that lyric. The second track, P2 Vatican Blues, it kind of is like a humorous look at the sort of the Catholic Church, and because it's humorous, he kind of gets away with it. The next track, Pisces Fish, is a nice acoustic based ballad, but a mid-paced ballad, and a really good song. It's kind of has a little bit of a change of pace in the middle. It sort of clocks in around 5 minutes, but again, really good song. Now the fourth track, looking for my life, is one of 3 outstanding songs on this album. This is a song where George, it's very upbeat, but George is kind of being very reflective and looking at his life and knowing that it is shortly going to come to an end. So it's terribly sad, but a brilliant song. Next is Rising Sun. Now this one clocks in at over 5 minutes, and it does smack a little bit of ELO, but in a good way. Again, this is a sort of a mid-paced ballad with philosophical lyrics, a song that I really like as well. Lots of slide guitar in this as well, as is the closing song on side 1, Marble Blues, which is an instrumental, and as you know, I'm not a fan of instrumentals, but this is a good one. Some amazing slide guitars on this sort of bluesy instrumental. This song won a Grammy in 2004 for the best instrumental. Now, side 2 opens up with the second of the outstanding songs on this album, Stuck Inside a Cloud, where George is kind of, again, is sort of reflecting on his ill health, basically. So it's, you know, it's a very sad song. He's got this lyric in the song: I'm talking to myself, crying as we part, knowing as I lose you, I also lose my heart. It's heartbreaking stuff, but brilliant stuff at the same time. Now, the next track, Run So Far, was the one track that we had heard before. We'd heard the Eric Clapton's version of this song. This is a song that George gave to Eric Clapton for his Journeyman album. And I think that this version is better than Eric Clapton's version. Eric's version has got a very sort of 80s drum sound on it. This doesn't have that on it. It's also it also cuts out one of the verses of the song, so it's a little bit more snappy. But it is kind of a laid back song, and again, a very enjoyable song. Next up is Never Get Over You, a delicious ballad. Again, lots of nice guitar in this song as well. This is a very guitar prominent album. The next track, Between the Devil and Deep Blue Sea, is a cover. It's George on ukulele. It's Jules Holland on sort of honky tonk piano. Again, it's very upbeat. It's joyous. I really like this song. The next track, Rocking Chair in Hawaii, was a track that was first tried out for the All Things Must Pass album in its very early form. They had a go at it. We can hear an early version of it on the extra material on the 50th anniversary box set. Again, it's very laid back. It's bluesy. Again, a very nice track. Nothing special, but it's a good track. The final track on the album is my absolute favourite, and I love this as being the last George Harrison song on the last George Harrison album, because within this one song, it encapsulates every kind of George that we've ever known. It encapsulates sort of lead guitarist George, spiritual George, angry George, humorous George, a lover of Indian music George. You know, he's angry about everything in this song. He's ranting like Joe Mayo on steroids. He's saying we're brainwashed as children, and then in later life by, digital devices and all that sort of stuff. He's angry about everything. But then, just as the anger dies down, he's still got time for some humour with that one verse. They brainwashed my great uncle. They brainwashed my cousin Bob. They even got my grandma when she was working for the mob. Just fantastic stuff. And anything that sort of encapsulates the different the extremes of George Harrison. There's that little bit during the Indian music section where you've got a tabla playing over a ukulele. Those are the extremes of George Harrison, and there's no way on earth that should ever work, but it absolutely does. And so Brainwashed is a really good album, a very underrated album, and it is my number 4 George Harrison album. Now, when we get to number 3, this is where I'm starting to struggle. On one hand, I've got the George Harrison self-titled album from 1979, and on the other hand, I've got 33 1/3 from 1976. And to be absolutely honest, choosing between them is a bit like choosing my favourite testicle. But I'm actually going to go for, at number 3, George Harrison's self-titled album from 1979. Almost perfect album. There was a real sort of confidence, return of confidence in George's writing and music for this album, buoyed by the relative success of 33 1/3 after 2 albums, Dark Horse and Extra Texture, that weren't received well either by fans or critics. Now, the album gets off to a great start. Love Comes to Everyone, a love song, obviously, to Olivia. It's really a very commercial song, very bouncy, very catchy, and quite often the first track on an album kind of sets the scene for the rest of the album, and this is a really good example of that. We see a very upbeat opening song, and that kind of follows throughout the album. The second and third track are kind of George is revisiting his Beatles past. The second track, Not Guilty, the song that they recorded 102 times during the White Album sessions and still weren't happy with it for reasons that are completely alien to me. The version that we got on Anthology and the 2018 White Album box set, fantastic song. I would have had that on the White Album in a heartbeat, but they, for some reason, didn't think it was good enough. Well, here it is for the first time released, same lyrics but completely different arrangement, much more laid back. It's one of those songs that if you've had a bad day, you put this on and everything is right in the world. I really like this version. Is it better than the version that should have been on the White Album? Probably not. The third track, Here Comes the Moon, obviously the little brother to Here Comes the Sun. Again, a very delicate ballad that I like a lot. The fourth track, Soft Hearted Hannah, is the story of a magic mushroom trip that George took while on holiday in 1978. And side 1 closes with probably one of the most upbeat, commercial, catchy songs that George ever wrote, Blow Away. George was almost embarrassed by how catchy this song was. It's a song that I absolutely love. It should have been a massive hit single. I don't know why it wasn't, but really a fantastic song. My favourite song from this album. So side 2 opens with the absolutely masterful track Faster, George's little tribute to the Formula One racing circus, if you like. George spent a lot of 1978 travelling around the world, going to all the races in all the various countries that it took place following that drivers' championship, and this is his tribute to those drivers. A really upbeat song, lots of slide guitar in it, and a song that was released as a single but didn't really do anything. Deserved much better in my opinion, but it's a great track and a great opener to side 2. Like this one a lot. The next track is Dark Sweet Lady, which is an understated ballad, another love song to Olivia. Nice little acoustic guitar riff in this song, and it does kind of go under the radar a little bit, but a very, very nice song indeed. Track 3, Your Love Is Forever, really does go under the radar, I feel. I think this is an absolutely superb track. Beautiful love song, beautifully sung by George. Exquisite slide guitar solo in the middle. Really, really nice song, and deserves much more praise than it really gets. The penultimate track is Soft Touch. Now, this song's got a kind of an interesting basis. What George did on this track was he took the horn solo at the end of the track Run of the Mill from the All Things Must Pass album, played that on acoustic guitar, and that basically formed the basis of the guitar riff in this song. Again, another love song, another gentle song, but again, it does go under the radar. So those 3 songs on side 2, all I feel are pretty underrated, but all really good. And the album finishes sort of in the way that it began, with a really upbeat song. So we've got this whole album is kind of bookended by 2 sort of really upbeat, joyous songs. If You Believe, co-written with Gary Wright. This is the only sort of nod to George's religious beliefs on this album, and it is joyous, and it's a great way to end the album. Lots of slide guitar throughout this album. So my number 3 is George Harrison's self-titled album from 1979, which means that my number 2 George Harrison album is 33 1/3 from 1976. I absolutely love this album. I got this album for my 16th birthday, and this is actually it. I don't have any other vinyl copies of this album. I've always loved this album, and I've never ever got bored of it. The first album released on Dark Horse Records, and coming after the disappointment of Extra Texture, it was a great relief to see George coming back with such a strong album full of really strong melodic songs. Fabulous stuff. So the album sort of kicks off with Woman Don't You Cry For Me, which is as funky as you like. A song that sort of started life during the All Things Must Pass sessions, was left off that album, left alone for quite a few years, and then brought out for this album. It's a great way to kick off the album. Love this song. Track 2, Dear One, is probably the weakest song on the album, I would say. It's another one of these songs where you're not sure whether George is talking about a woman or about his deity. He's done a few of those type of songs before, but over 5 minutes, this is probably too long. It doesn't really go anywhere for me, and it is my least favourite on the album. Track 3, Beautiful Girl, absolutely fantastic song. Love Beautiful Girl. Interesting sort of backstory, I suppose, to this song, because this again was a song that was tried out for the All Things Must Pass sessions and left in the can, and then brought out again for this album. Now, when it was first written in 1970, the beautiful girl in the song would have been Patty, but by the time it got finished in 1976, the beautiful girl would have been Olivia. So a nice little twist in the tale then, but it is a fantastic ballad. Some lovely keyboards going throughout this, played by Billy Preston, and a nice little guitar solo in this song as well. Beautiful Girl, fantastic song. Now, track 4 is the absolutely joyous This Song. This song should have been a massive hit single, but it wasn't. It's a humorous look at George's troubled court case, He's So Fine versus My Sweet Lord, the case brought against him by Bright Tunes, owned by Alan Klein of all people, and the lyrics to this song are really humorous, and it's good that George is looking at it this way. This song has nothing tricky about it. This song ain't black or white, and as far as I know, doesn't infringe on anyone's copyright. And then he goes on to say, this tune has nothing bright about it. This tune ain't good or bad or come or what may. My experts tell me that it's okay. Great stuff. Thumping piano again from Billy Preston on this song. Really, really great song. As I say, should have been a big hit single. So the final track on side one, See Yourself, is a superb song lyrically. It started off life in 1967 as a comment on Paul McCartney getting slagged off by the media for admitting that he'd taken LSD. It's easier to tell a lie than it is to tell the truth. It's easier to kill a fly than it is to turn it loose. And then he kind of turns it on the critics. It's easier to give a sigh and be like all the rest who stand around and crucify you while you do your best. A fantastic song and a great song, See Yourself, that closes side one. Side two opens up with It's What You Value, a song that is kind of given its funkiness by the bass and the piano on this, but a great, really great drum beat and a cowbell actually played by George Harrison himself, which is nice to hear. The song sort of started off live as a comment on Jim Keltner, who wanted to be paid for playing on the 1974 US tour, not by cash, but with a Mercedes for 50, which is a great story as well, but another great song that I really love. Next up is the cover of Cole Porter's True Love. Again, slide guitar all over this song, this classic song. George was a big fan of Cole Porter, and I'm a big fan of this cover version. The next track up is Pure Smokey, another tribute to Smokey Robinson. He did one on Extra Texture, and the music, most of the musical attributes on this song are taken from that song on Extra Texture. But here we have a much better lyric, a fine tribute to Smokey Robinson. Really great song. The penultimate track, Crackerbox Palace, is an absolute belter. Again, it should have been a massive hit. Again, it's humorous lyrics. Who can not love a song that starts off with the line, I was young when I was born? Crackerbox Palace was actually the name of Lord Buckley's house, a name that I think George adopted for his own Friar Park. But when I first heard this song, I thought Crackerbox Palace meant the world. We welcome you to the world. We welcome you to Crackerbox Palace, sort of being sung to maybe a newborn baby or something like that. We welcome you to Crackerbox Palace. But a fantastic song, probably my favourite from this album. And the album finishes with an absolutely beautiful closer, Learning How to Love You, an absolutely delicious ballad that has got the most gorgeous acoustic guitar solo in the middle. Really, really fantastic way to end the album. So 33 and a Third is my second favourite George Harrison album. It's an album that I've never really got bored with. Love it to death. So number 2 is 33 and a Third. And so we've hit the number 1 spot, and quite obviously it is All Things Must Pass. This is my totally filthy original copy that I also got for my 16th birthday. It was a good birthday that year. Now, the trouble with these George Harrison rankings is that 9 times out of 10, it's going to end up with All Things Must Pass as the number 1. But I guess it's the ones that are in between, but the ones that are below that and how they fall that make these ranking videos interesting. Now, I count All Things Must Pass as a double album with a bonus disc. I don't count it as a triple album. I know that some reviewers downgrade All Things Must Pass a little bit because they include the let's be honest, the unpleasantness of the apple jam as part of the album, and therefore lower their sort of grading of it. But I count this as a double album with a bonus. Okay, so the album I think probably is not only George Harrison's best album, I think it is probably the best solo album of them all for me. It starts off with the fantastic ballad I'd Have You Anytime, co-written with Bob Dylan. I think Bob wrote the All I Have Is Yours part. Some delicious guitar licks in this song, which George very generously gives to Eric Clapton to play. My Sweet Lord, obviously a massive worldwide hit. Not one of my favourites on this album. I've just heard it too much by now. It doesn't really excite me at all anymore. It's just one of those things, I suppose. And I know that a lot of people really like Wah Wah as a song. For me, it's a bit of a sort of a crowded mess on this album. I much prefer the version of the song on the Concert for Bangladesh. That I think that really shows up the true value of that song for me. There's just too much going on. It just is a big cacophony of noise, and it's quite hard to make out the various instruments. And of course, George's vocal is so low in the mix. The Jewel in the Crown of side one isn't it a pity? Version 1, the 7-minute version. This was a song that could have been on Revolver, but it was turned away. It could have been on Sergeant Pepper, but it was turned away. And you know, it's difficult to judge because we don't know what sort of state the song was in at that time. Probably not anything as grand as it appears on this album, but you do wonder how a song of the quality of Isn't It a Pity could get overlooked for something like I Want to Tell You. John, Paul and George Martin are supposed to be able to tell a good song when they hear one, and probably wasn't the case with Isn't It a Pity, but a fantastic song, a real anthem. Absolutely love it. Side 2 opens with What Is Life, which is just an absolute belter. It's got guitar riffs, it's got horns, it's got backing vocals, it's got thumping drums, it's got the lot. It's got everything that a good rock song should have. From side 2, really like Behind That Locked Door, a sort of gentle country song, a song to Bob Dylan, sort of encouraging him to get out and play live again after his motorcycle accident when he was suffering from a lack of confidence. Also let it down with that big bombastic intro that somehow seamlessly merges into the delicate verse of that song. It shouldn't really work, but it absolutely does. But that big intro kind of hits you right in the chest when it comes pounding out of the speakers, and it kind of just fades away into this delicate ballad. Brilliant stuff. Also really love Run of the Mill on side 2. Again, a gentle ballad, a ballad that is really talking to the other 3 Beatles about getting their shit together, and a great song, but a strange structure for the song because there's no verses or choruses. It's just line after line after line after line with no break, no guitar solo in the middle or anything, just a big line of vocal. And I absolutely love that horn solo at the end of the song. Side 3 opens up with Beware of Darkness, and it's a toss-up for me between that and All Things Must Pass as the best song on the album. Beware of Darkness finds George troubled, worried about outside influences and how they affect our lives, warning us about this and warning us about that. The song just absolutely oozes class. Musically, it's one of the most complex musical arrangements that George has undertaken, and lyrically it finds him at his most eloquent. Apple Scruffs is a lovely acoustic folk song dedicated to the fans that camped out on the steps of the Apple building in Savile Row. A story brilliantly told by Carol Bedford in her book Waiting for the Beatles, which has got a lot about George in that book. Great song, Apple Scruffs. Let It Roll, again, and really nice acoustic based ballad. Really love that song. Waiting for You All, not one of my favourite songs on the album for the same reason that Wawa isn't. It just seems there's too much going on to really grapple with it, but I get that it's got a really strong melody, and it's a bit of a thumper. Side 3 ends with All Things Must Pass, which is probably my favourite song on the album. Again, a song that we saw the Beatles trying during the Get Back sessions, not really giving it too much attention, but we got a kind of a clue of how a Beatles version of All Things Must Pass might have sounded with John and Paul harmonising on it, which is something that is lacking from the George Harrison version on All Things Must Pass. But we've got pretty much everything else, a sort of a piano-led ballad. Billy Preston on the piano there. We've got Pete Drake's slide guitar, a pedal steel as well, and of course George's slide guitar. It's not without some degree of irony that we note that Paul McCartney performed All Things Must Pass at the concert for George. Paul, largely responsible for dismissing the song during the Get Back sessions in favour of things like, Dig a Pony or One After 909. I mean, how did that happen? The fact that he performed that at the concert for George was maybe a little nod, a nod that came far too late, finally admitting that All Things Must Pass is an absolute masterpiece. Side 4 opens up with I Dig Love, which I know a lot of people don't like, but I really do like it, and I dig it, in fact. I dig Love. Art of Dying is kind of heavy metal Harrison. All 4 of Derek and the Dominoes on this song, another sort of a real great rock song. And Hear Me Lord, the end track, for a long time was my favourite track on the album. It's not now, but I still really like it. A great sort of gospel song, and I love all the different changes of pace in the song as well. Another sort of anthem for me. So that is it. That is my George Harrison album ranking. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please tell me down in the comments whether you think I've got it right, whether I've got it wrong. Tell me your rankings. Anything you want to tell me about these albums, please do so down in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. I read all your comments and I will respond to all your comments. Okay, well, that is it from me. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Thanks very much for watching, and I will see you all very soon. Bye bye.